this point, but one thing that strikes me in all of this is that this is called the House of Commons. Our job is to come here and represent the common person. And it is so far removed from the common person, this entire debate. But we are dealing with a situation where the Prime Minister of the day is now saying that he regrets the appointment of Mandelson. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores of DV and Strap and CTC and everything else, because my people in Lagan Valley don't know what that means. And a lot of people are banking on the ordinary man and woman on the street not to know what that means, and to stop being curious and to suspend their expectations, because this is all highfalutin serious stuff and we don't really know what that is. Maybe they did do right, maybe they didn't do right, because they're bamboozled. But I'm going to break it down for them. I would say this to the Prime Minister. What was it about the twice disgraced, paedophile adjacent, self-styled Prince of Darkness that you found so attractive to put into this plum job, not just of government, but of the United Kingdom on the world stage? Yeah. What was it, Prime Minister, that appealed to you about Peter Mandelson? We still don't have the answer. No. We still don't have the answer. No. But all I know is that my constituents are disgusted with all of this. Yep. And this isn't the first time, it's not the second time, it's not the third time. It has been going round in a merry-go-round no matter who it is. And I am indignant, and I am outraged. And a lot of people in this building are expecting us to no longer be outraged. We'll be outraged. Because if we can't prove that this works, we know he's going to step into the shadows. We know he's going to be out there setting the algorithms. We know who is going to be preying on the carcass of what was a once great democracy. And we've seen other democracies fail. Let's not fool ourselves that the UK is immune from this. And the number one thing we can do within our gift is to show that we still value integrity. And for those reasons, there is not a single excuse that this government can come up with that I can sell to my constituents or myself that I will believe. And for those reasons, I believe that the Prime Minister needs to go, not just for his own party, but more importantly, for the sake of the country.
Yeah. Dr. Ben Spencer.
You saw that moment in the House of Commons, and if you did not, you need to, because it was one of those rare occasions where someone stood up in Parliament and actually said what a huge number of people outside of Westminster have been thinking for quite some time. No jargon, no hiding behind procedure. Just a straight, direct, and frankly devastating contribution that cut right through the noise. The speaker was Sasha Eastwood, and she opened in a way that immediately set the tone for everything that followed. She acknowledged, as others before her had already done, that by the time you are deep into one of these debates, it can feel like everything has already been said. You know how it goes in Parliament. Speaker after speaker, point after point, and eventually you start wondering whether anyone is actually listening or whether the whole thing is just a very expensive talking shop. But Eastwood was not there to repeat what had already been said. She was there to do something different, and the thing she said right at the start is worth sitting with for a moment. She pointed out that the building they were standing in is called the House of Commons. The Commons, as in it is supposed to represent common people, ordinary people. The kind of people who are not versed in the finer points of parliamentary procedure or diplomatic appointments or the various acronyms that get thrown around in these debates like confetti. And that observation landed because it is true. Anyone who has ever watched a parliamentary debate and found themselves completely lost within about 90 seconds knows exactly what she was talking about. There is a language that gets spoken inside Westminster that is almost deliberately impenetrable to anyone on the outside, and Eastwood was calling that out. She was saying, very plainly, that this entire debate had drifted so far from the common person that it risked becoming exactly the kind of thing that ordinary people feel shut out of. She specifically said she was not going to get into the various acronyms and technical terms being thrown around in the debate because, as she put it, her people in Lagan Valley do not know what that means. And she is right. Most people do not. And the uncomfortable truth she was highlighting is that some people in positions of power are actively counting on that. They are banking on the ordinary man and woman on the street, not knowing what any of it means, not asking questions, not pushing back. Because if you can make something sound complicated enough, people stop being curious. They suspend their expectations. They assume the grown-ups in the room must know what they are doing and leave them to it. Eastwood was having none of it. She said she was going to break it down, and she did in the most direct terms possible. She turned her attention to the Prime Minister's appointment of Peter Mandelson. Now, the Prime Minister himself had by this point apparently said publicly that he regrets the appointment. Which, when you stop and think about it, raises its own set of questions. Because if you regret an appointment, the natural follow-up question is why you made it in the first place. And that is exactly the question Eastwood asked, except she did not ask it politely or wrap it in softeners. She asked what it was about Peter Mandelson that the Prime Minister found so attractive for this role. Not just any government role, but a significant position representing the United Kingdom on the world stage. And she described Mandelson in terms that were, to put it mildly, unflattering. She called him twice disgraced and pedophile adjacent. She used the phrase self-styled Prince of Darkness, which is a label that has followed Mandelson around for many years and is, to say the least, not a badge of honor. Her question to the Prime Minister was simple. What appealed to you about this person? Why him? Why this job? Why now? And then she paused and noted that there was still no answer. The House had still not received a satisfactory explanation for why the appointment was made. She said it again, just to make it land properly. We still do not have the answer. That is a significant thing to say out loud in Parliament, because Parliament is, in theory, the mechanism through which government is held to account. It is the place where ministers are supposed to explain their decisions. And when a member stands up and says plainly that we still do not have the answer to a fundamental question about a major public appointment, that is not a small thing. That is the system not working the way it is supposed to work. Eastwood then made clear what this felt like from the perspective of her constituents. She said they are disgusted, not disappointed, not concerned, disgusted. And she did not limit that disgust to this particular situation, because she made the point that this is not a new problem. It is not the first time something like this has happened. It is not the second time or the third time. It keeps going around, she said, like a merry-go-round. Different names, same patterns, same questions without answers, same sense that something is not right and nobody is being properly held to account for it. She said she is indignant. She said she is outraged. And then she said something that is worth paying close attention to because it speaks to something much bigger than just this one appointment or this one Prime Minister. She said there are people in that building who expect members of Parliament to eventually stop being outraged, to get used to it, to normalise it, to move on to the next thing and forget about it. And Eastwood was saying very clearly that she will not be doing that. She will remain outraged because the stakes are too high to shrug and look the other way. She pointed to what happens when integrity in public life is allowed to erode. She said, we know who steps into the shadows when that happens. We know who starts setting the algorithms. We know who ends up preying on what is left of a democracy that has been hollowed out. She did not name names, but the implication was clear enough. When public trust collapses, others move in to fill the space. And that is not a theoretical concern. We have seen it happen in other countries. Other democracies have failed. The United Kingdom, she said, is not immune from that. That is a serious argument. It is not melodramatic. It is a straightforward observation about what happens when democratic institutions lose the confidence of the people they are supposed to serve. When ordinary people feel like the system is run by and for people who operate by different rules, they do not simply accept it quietly. They look elsewhere. They find other voices, other movements, other explanations for why their lives feel the way they do. And not all of those voices and movements are playing the same game with the same rules. The number one thing within Parliament's gift, Eastwood argued, is to show that integrity still matters, that it still has value, that it is not just a word politicians wheel out at election time and quietly park once they are in office. Showing that integrity has meaning is not just a nice thing to do. It is a structural requirement of a functioning democracy. And if Parliament cannot or will not do that, then Parliament is handing a weapon to everyone who wants to argue that the whole thing is rotten and needs to be burned down. She ended where she had to end, given the weight of everything she had just said. She said there is not a single excuse this government can produce that she could sell to her constituents. Not one. She said she would not believe it even if they tried, and her conclusion was direct. The Prime Minister needs to go, not for the sake of his party. That almost felt like an afterthought. More importantly, she said, for the sake of the country. That is a big thing to say. It is also a very specific thing to say. She was not making a partisan point about Labour versus Conservative or whoever else. She was making a point about the country. About what kind of country this is and what kind of example it sets when a Prime Minister appoints someone widely regarded as twice disgraced to a prominent public role and then, when pressed, offers no real explanation. What made Eastwood's speech cut through where so many others in these debates do not is that she did exactly what she said she was going to do. She broke it down. She took something that had been wrapped in layers of political and diplomatic language and she stripped all of that away and asked the simple question underneath it all. Why? Why him? Why this job? What were you thinking? And in the absence of a satisfying answer to that question, she drew the only conclusion she felt she could honestly draw, which is that the person who made the decision and cannot or will not explain it properly should no longer be in the position to make decisions on behalf of the country. Simple as that. No jargon required.